Hello, guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Skills and Abilities. So today we're going to be looking at a Druid elemental skill. I believe we've already taken a look at Cyclone Armor, and now we're going to be moving on to Twister. This was a request by somebody, but this is also a skill that I've done a lot of research into. Really quite a large amount, and I seem to have stripped this character of his gear, which is this is always nice to see when you log into your character. So it's like, oh yeah, that's right, I took all that stuff, put it on another guy.
Yes.
You know who that guy is? That's the new Zoo Druid that I'm building. So my Zoo Druid is going to be really interesting too, and we're going to be talking about him. Let me go get my gear so I can actually show you this real quick. I'll be right back. Alright, so I cobbled together his gear from the four corners of the universe, and now we have here our Hurricane Bear, actually, is what he is now. I've been respecking him and playing around with him, and one of the things that I did was I went into the bear tree instead, which I thought could be rather fun. He can be built one of two ways, doesn't really matter. But this video is not about him. I have videos about him. This video is about Twister. So Twister is a skill that does relatively low damage. In fact, at level 1, it's only 6 to 8. And even when it gets to level 20, Twister only does about 66 to 68 damage per Twister. It does have, of course, 3 Twisters. If you read it, it says releases several small whirlwinds that will cut a path through your enemies. Maximum level reached over here. It has a stun duration of 0.4 seconds, unsynergized, and it doesn't really do very much damage. In fact, for the most part, when you use Twister, you will be rather unimpressed. It's not really a particularly strong ability, and even in Hell difficulty, you'll notice that it just kind of doesn't really do very well. It is relatively easy to cast. It is physical damage, by the way. As you can see, it is white on the character screen. Generally, when you have an ability, the ability is going to be determined by its color, what kind of damage type. Like, for instance, if I were to switch over to Hurricane, Hurricane is usually represented as blue, which means that it is cold damage. When you switch over to something else like Arctic Blast, see, it is also blue. If you go over to a fire skill, it's going to be red, and so forth and so on. And Twister and Tornado are both physical damage skills, as you can see. Now, Twister is very nice just simply because it has a nice little stun. The stun will interrupt enemies and will kind of just buy you a little bit of time. Now, as a Hurricane Druid, it's probably not going to be one of the main skills that you're casting on a regular basis. In fact, you're probably going to be using Tornado as one of your main damage abilities. You'll notice, though, that Tornado and Twister both have an erratic flight path, and they kind of just go wherever they want to go. The beauty of this skill over Tornado is that because it has 3, you're pretty much guaranteed to hit whatever is in front of you. So if you do come across a group of monsters, you will notice that Tornado, the Twisters generally tend to hit something, especially if you're attacking correctly. And sometimes they can even hit multiple times, because if you notice, they do kind of like a little tiny knockback as well, which is interesting. And the little tiny knockback can cause them to get knocked back into the Twister, and then take a second strike of the Twister, basically getting hit multiple times and getting stunned multiple times. As you can see, the stun effect is very clearly pronounced by the little, like stars, the cartoon-esque type stars that appear above the monster's head. And, it's very obvious that it has occurred. Now, one of the beauties of this particular skill is that it can be synergized by the Druid's natural abilities. So, for instance, if you have the 2 synergies for this ability as far as damage is concerned, which is Tornado and Hurricane, they will give 10% extra per level. So that's 10 times 20, and then that times 2. So we get a rather large amount of damage of 400% extra added to Twister. And as you can see, at level 30, I've managed to get up to about 972 to 982 damage per Twister. Now, it's not really that great, though. In Hell difficulty, that damage is not enough to really do enough to be viable, and that's part of the issue. And that's why most people generally go with a Tornado instead. However, there are some interesting things that can be done with Tornado that work out really interestingly. There's a couple items in the game. I actually have them all on right now. They are called chance to cast items. One of them is the Windhammer Ogre Ball, which has a 33% chance to cast level 22 Twister on striking. There is also the Rain Dusk Shroud, which has a 5% chance to cast level 15 Twister on striking. We also have the Carrion Wind Ring, which is 8% chance to cast level 13 Twister on striking, and you can, of course, wear 2 of them, which means that you can potentially have 1, 2, 3, 4 chance to cast effects at the same time. Now, it is important to note that these are all separate. They do not add together, so you don't get a 33% chance plus a 5% chance plus an 8% chance plus 8% chance. It doesn't work that way. What you do get, however, is you get a single 33% chance, a single 5% chance, a single 8% chance, and another single 8% chance. And all of these together add up to 4 chances total when upon striking to have a chance to at least do 1 Twister. And when you cast Twister, you'll notice that it does not red out. And this is important because if the ability does not red out, that means it does not have a delay. So, for instance, if I am utilizing, say, Hurricane, you'll notice that, well, actually, Hurricane used to red out, but I think they actually just fixed that. That's called basically the delay on the ability, and I guess they took the delay away from Hurricane entirely. I'm trying to remember which one of these. I think they actually took away all the delays off of these. I don't think Tornado has a delay either anymore. They used to red out the ability, the skill itself, to show you that it was a delay. And I'd like to take you to a character and show you that real quick. Let me go grab one. Alright, so Meteor still has it, and so does Frozen Orb. And you'll notice that when you cast Frozen Orb, the skill is redded out. This means that it cannot be cast again within that time period from you. So, for instance, if I had a weapon, like Voice of Reason, that has a faster Frozen Orb proc, and I attack relatively quickly within a certain period of time, maybe I have 2 Voice of Reasons on a Frenzy Merc or a Frenzy Barb, and I get a proc of Frozen Orb. If I proc again during the delay of Frozen Orb, it's not going to cast 2. But because the ability that we're looking at does not have a delay, you can potentially cast multiple within the same attack spectrum. And to show you how this works, I'm actually going to take you out here with my Gilbert. I actually named him after a hurricane, by the way. That's the reason why his name is Gilbert. Hurricane Gilbert, if you ever want to look it up. I just thought it was a funny name. I also thought it was funny that there was a hurricane named Gilbert in the first place. So the way that this build works is it leverages the synergies. There are multiple synergies involved, obviously, so I want to beef up the damage of it, so I want to do more damage. I also want to increase the stun length, so I'd increase the stun length to 1 second by beefing up the Arctic Blast synergy. And basically, when I go out there and I actually do my thing and I start attacking, what you'll notice is there are tons and tons and tons of little procs. Now, for the purposes of this video, I'm going to switch it to the old graphics because I do feel like it's a little bit easier to see the twisters in the old graphics versus the new graphics. I feel like the ones in the new graphics can sometimes more easily get lost. And I just want you guys to be able to see it easier. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and beef up our little army here. I'm not going to cast my Hurricane. I normally cast Hurricane during this, but I'm not going to because it's going to obfuscate the twisters. I want you to see the twisters. Let me go ahead and put my Cyclone armor on cast here, though. Had to be a fanaticism. And what I'm hoping to show you guys here is the multiple procs. Once you really get attacking, you start to see the multiple procs more often, but they don't always pop out. Scourge. And essentially what I'm doing here is I'm spamming twisters. Physical damage is still one of my main proponents. I'm obviously not entirely relying on the twisters for damage, but the twisters act as, number 1, a stun mechanism that helps keep me alive, and number 2, it acts as a ability for me to have multiple damage effects, so AoE damage, essentially, This AoE damage is going to travel out very nicely, and as you can see, many times I'm getting multiple Twister procs in a row. Definitely at least 6 to 9 sometimes even. Sometimes it even seems like I'm getting at I think 3 or 4 when I'm very lucky. If I'm very lucky and I manage to get all the procs at once, I can get up to 4, but that's like pretty rare for every single one of them to roll as a success, especially considering some of these are pretty low percent chances. The one on the armor is only a 5% chance. The rings are 8% chances, but the 33% chance on the weapon is practically always going off. And so it's kind of like a constant rotation of 1 proc, no proc, 2 procs, 3 procs, 1 proc, no proc, no proc, 4 procs, 1 proc, no proc, and so forth and so on. If you are a druid of any type, a werewolf druid, if you are a feral rage druid, a rabies druid, a fury druid, if you are a werebear who is attacking with maul, or maybe you're doing fire claws, or maybe you're a werewolf with fire claws, or maybe you're utilizing hunger, it doesn't really matter. You can put basically 1 Carrion Wind on your druid, or you could put Rain on your druid, or you could be using the Windhammer Ogre Ball. There's a lot of different ways you could utilize this Twister spam. You don't have to build up the damage portion of Twister, although I have built up the damage portion of Twister in my particular build. You don't have to do that. What you're trying to do is just give yourself a free stun. So as you're attacking, as you're using, your Fury ability, or as you're using your Maul, or as you're using Fire Claws, you can have an additional stun, which is coming out on a regular basis and is helping you in pretty much all encounters. If you put 20 points into Arctic Blast, you will get a very nice synergy bonus with Twister of 20% duration per level, which it is 0.4 seconds when it starts out, so 0.4 plus. And that is, of course, 20% per level, so 20 times 20 is, I believe, 400%, so 400%, which means plus 1.6 seconds, which is going to get you to a total duration of 2 seconds on your stun, which is pretty darn sweet. A 2-second stun is a pretty long period of time, and being able to put most of the monsters that you come across into a 2-second stun duration is actually pretty darn cool as a melee character. Even if you were just a Fireclaws Druid, or a Maul Bear, or a Fury Druid. And now the Bear might be the one that you might not want to do this on, because the Bear does have a stun on his Maul already. He also does have Shockwave. But here's the thing. The Maul is stunning the target that you're attacking, and the Twisters are flying off in the background, and they're stunning everything else. And so it's almost like having an additional stun added to your Maul. Twister is one of those abilities that does seem relatively innocuous at first, and there definitely are some situations where you can utilize Twister very nicely. Like, for instance, if you're doing Bale runs, you can just spam Twisters into the Bale waves and just kind of keep everything locked down. But for the most part, Twister is not really used as a main damage ability. And it does kind of get pushed to the side a lot, despite the fact that it has some very nice utility. For a mere 20 points and essentially just 1 ring slot, you can essentially have level 13 Twisters with 2-second stun duration spamming with your Fury Druid or your Fireclaws Druid. You can also utilize the Twisters relatively well on a Elemental Druid, like if instead of a Bear Druid, let's say you were just, your every day average ordinary Hurricane Druid who's in there doing his thing. You can totally utilize Tornado on one hand, Twister on the other, and you can utilize these in tandem to stun targets and keep them locked down. I don't necessarily recommend spamming only Twisters, but if you are in a situation where you are in need of some extra stunning capacity, they can certainly be very valuable. Take River of Flame, for instance. If we went down River of Flame with our Hurricane Druid, we could utilize our stun effect to great extent here. These monsters are immune to my cold damage, so I could just sit here and I could just spam the Twisters and let my Mercenary dish out physical damage on these monsters that are immune to my Hurricane. And as you can see, while spamming the Twisters, I'm relatively safe. And so is my mercenary, for that matter. Now, of course, I could also throw in some tornadoes in there, especially if I build up the stun duration to 2 seconds. You've got a little bit more time, whereas if you only have the stun duration at the original base value, which is 0.4 seconds, that's going to be a lot more difficult for you to get those additional attacks off in between the stuns. I mean, if you think about it, you could just sit there and you could count it, right? So it's like one. Hold on, let's see. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Yeah, having a 2-second stun duration on the twisters would definitely make it very easy for you to go back and forth between the two. You would definitely have time. You might even have time, honestly, for 2 tornadoes and then a twister, 2 tornadoes and then a twister, and so forth and so on. But you could adjust it, of course, mid-battle to figure out what the right balance is to keep the monsters, pinned down, essentially. And all the while, you could, of course, have your tornado and your hurricane and your twisters all going at the same time, which, is, of course, is going to be pretty painful to whatever monster you're fighting. I do think that Twister is an interesting ability and can definitely work its way into any build, unless you're a summon druid, that is. If you're a summon druid, maybe you're not actually attacking anything, and if you're not attacking anything, it's probably not going to be the best choice. In fact, as a summon druid, if you're going to go with a stun, one of the easiest things is to go with Shockwave instead. Shockwave is actually pretty nice as a summon druid. You're going to put all your points into the summon tree, and then you're basically just going to put a couple points down here, grab Shockwave, get the nice AoE stun, so that you can dish out some pretty nice damage that way. Really not a lot more to go over with Twister. I feel like I've covered just about everything, even a practical demonstration of a hurricane bear. And as always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, even when they are twisted. And keep watching.